Good evening, welcome to Monday's Midlands Today from the BBC. Tonight, the hunt for answers after England erupted into violence begins in Birmingham. The senior politician leading the inquiry has told Midlands Today that the number of police officers available to quell the disorder and the very young age of the rioters were the big issues in the West Midlands.
So far, 103 people have appeared in court, and more than a quarter of them were aged between 10 and 17. In a moment, we'll hear from the MP, Keith Vaz, the chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee. But first, this report from Kath Mackey.
How can we build much closer links between schools and the communities that they serve?
Everyone wanted a say, most got it. The aim of the conference at Handsworth College in Birmingham was to learn the lessons of the Birmingham riots.
I like to concentrate only on one issue, on the absent fathers.
We're watching on the television other places being set fire to and people in shops being, having to get out, so it was quite frightening in a way.
Local residents, youth and community groups, council workers and the police all sat round the tables to talk about youth, families and community safety. 103 people have so far appeared in court charged with crimes linked to the rioting in the West Midlands. Just over a quarter of those were under 17. A shocking statistic may be, but few here were surprised.
By criminalising them even more, you're isolating them, which means that reaching out to them will be much more difficult, and that's something that we can't afford right now because they are our future.
We've heard a lot this morning about youth alienation and about breakdowns in parts of society. There'll be few people who disagree, but doesn't it sound like excuses being made for what was blatant criminality?
Well, there are elements of blatant criminality, and there were other people who joined in. What we want to do is find out what caused all this and to listen to the views of the people.
We decided on the Thursday that David Cameron decided to recall Parliament to hold an inquiry.
The Home Affairs Select Committee is conducting an inquiry into the riots. Its chairman, Keith Vaz, came along to listen. He was flanked by local Labour MPs and members of the Shadow Cabinet, including Caroline Flint, who stressed the importance of these meetings.
It hasn't been the same around the whole country, and I think having that sort of insight into what were the particular issues here, how the different organisations, the police and others handled it, and in moving forward, what lessons are there to learn is really important for us as politicians to spare the time to listen to.
There's no doubt a lot of good intentions have been heard here today, but what might be more difficult is the reality of transferring that mood for change and all those ideas onto the streets. Kath Mackey, BBC Midlands Today, Birmingham.
Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Keith Vaz to find out what he had learned today.
That there are particular circumstances that relate to Birmingham, but also there were common themes with respect to policing and the disorders from places like Tottenham and Manchester and Leicester. So it's gathering all that information together and making sure the committee can take it further.
What are the particular aspects relating to Birmingham, would you say?
I think people were concerned about the level of the police presence. They were concerned to ensure that those who were responsible for the disorder are very young people, some of them much younger than anyone would have expected.
Well, 10-year-olds.
Very young. And we need to find out exactly what the causes of the riots were, and indeed how we can ensure that with appropriate police tactics and the police presence that it never happens again. I think it's a learning experience which we want to make sure is not repeated in the future.
And how much of it do you feel was criminality and how much of it was a deeper issue?
The vast majority was criminality. A number of those who were apprehended have criminal records, not just in Birmingham but in other parts of the country. But we need to make sure that we also look at the wider issues while concentrating on the very few days that these disorders occurred on.
And what about the policing? I mean, do you think the police imposed themselves enough?
Well, I've just been to see the Chief Constable and he's agreed to give evidence to the Select Committee when we begin our oral hearings in London. I think that's going to be very useful. We want to hear from the police authority and those on the ground. I think we need to look at police numbers as part of the overall review that we are doing.
And briefly, how can you stop this happening again?
To make sure that we learn the lessons, that is engaging with the communities and making sure we have enough visible police officers to stop it happening again.
Keith Vaz, thank you very much.
Well, later in the programme, we'll be discussing